chemical process. It's a social process, and it changes. So Giddens says, a person's identity is not to be found in behavior, nor, important though this is, in the reaction of others, but in the capacity to keep a particular narrative going. Really interesting stuff, some years old now. And because sociology, and Giddens was the sort of most famous sociologist of his day, is a form of storytelling. Ken Plummer is a sociologist who uses the concept of story to explore the ways that people understand and represent their sexual experience. He wrote a famous book called Telling Sexual Stories. So lesbians and gays coming out. There is a coming out narrative. People who've experienced abuse. There is a survivor narrative. Trans people now have narratives of that journey that they went on. And disabled people have those narratives. So you know the work of Irving Goffman, another person who's as famous among psychologists as sociologists. And in Stigma, a fantastic book, still relevant 50 years on, people who are socially excluded by virtue of physical impairment, mental impairment, sexuality, lots of other differences, have a sense of spoiled identity. He talks about them being discredited because their difference is well known, or they are discreditable because their difference is hidden and they want to manage information to prevent it coming out. And so there is this stigma which might either be enacted, the way people treat them, or it might be felt in the sense that they internalize that shame or anxiety. So we talk about self-stigma. And we're still, you know, earlier this morning, you were using these words stigma. We're still using those words. We might want to use the words discrimination or cultural attitude. The feminist movement was called consciousness-raising, which leads to anger about the way you've been treated, resentment at being put down, and hopefully political action. And now last year we were 100 years on from the suffragettes, the suffragists, and that was exactly what they were about, was we're fed up with this. We demand the right to vote. We're equal citizens. And when you look at those slogans and those direct action activities of the suffragists and the suffragettes 100 years ago, you can see very much Me Too and these other movements of today. So, you know, it comes around in waves. Self-redefinition, not definition for others. Remember, Foucault, one should not be a homosexual, but one who clings passionately to the idea of being gay. Don't let them tell you who you are. Be yourself. Be, you know, part of this movement. And I think that's very helpful. But I think it's also problematic. New possibilities for individual affirmation and identity. There's nothing wrong with you. It's the way you're treated. So in the disability world, we don't so much talk about mental illness anymore. We talk about psychosocial disability. The social model of disability says you are disabled by society, not by your body or your mind. So psychosocial disability means you aren't wrong, you aren't different, you're not inferior, you're not sick. You are treated badly by others, and that is the problem. Yeah? So there's people reject the way they've been trained to think, this idea of disability as a negative thing, this what would be called internalized depression. Paulo Freire, the great educator, says, self-depreciation is another characteristic of the oppressed, which derives from their internalization of the opinion that oppressors hold of them. So often do they hear that they're good for nothing, know nothing, and are incapable of learning anything, that they're sick, lazy, and unproductive. She says that rather than conforming to group culture and a discouraging debate, rather than having this drastically oversimplified group identity, we should seek recognition not as member of a disadvantaged group, but in terms of individual status. She's talking about status subordination. And what she's saying is, look, we shouldn't be trying to valorize a group. We should be trying to make sure that two individuals are peers, that they can talk as equals. So women and men, straight and gay, disabled and non-disabled, what we want is for you, regardless of those differences, to be able to speak with anybody else as an equal. Not to valorize the group and say, our group are better than your group and give us space to speak and only we can define ourselves. But to say, as what we want, our goal is not to strengthen those groups, but to make sure that individuals can be recognized. They can parity of participation, parity, peers.